Dawn comes low and wet, a gray wool pulled tight over a town with its ribs showing. Drizzle turns brick dust and rust into paste. Ernst Vogel stands on the glacis of his Panzer IV, boots slipping, engine coughing like an old smoker beneath him, a torn gasket puffing white in irregular beats. He looks down into the turret ring and says it like an order, like a prayer. Paint it bigger. Time is short, 18 to 22 minutes to clear the ford if nothing snaps, and the first wagons are already on the stones. Clara Hahn has a mess tin in one hand and a coil of wire in the other, hair jammed under a cap gone the color of dirty snow. She stirs diesel into tar and soot scraped from a ruined blacksmith soot box, the mix bittersweet and wrong, black string dripping off a stick. It will hold if the cold keeps. It will run if the rain thickens. She tests it with 2 fingers and decides to risk it anyway, because indecision costs seconds they do not have. Otto Brenner presses his brow to the rubber eye cup, the 7.5 centimeters cacao, 40 L48, quiet and insufficient if a heavy comes. He counts instead of praying, 7 AP, 19 HE, fuses checked, breech oiled thin for the cold. He slaps the traverse handwheel to check the stop. In his mind, a carrier full of children from 2 days ago moves and freezes again. He keeps his eyes away from Vogel until he can breathe without the weight of that memory. "Shadow first," Clara says, surprising herself with the tone. She climbs the bow, boots biting into seams slick with rain. She drags her brush, a mop head wired to a stick, along the turret side in a thick black curve around the cupola, a false turret ring meant to read steel through glass at 600 meters. The tar shines too new. She thumbs soot into it until it sits like a bruise. She makes it too wide, then erases with diesel on a rag, leaving a gray halo that could pass for chipped paint if someone wants to believe. Mortars on the far bank thump, try for the rail line, the embankment shaking rust loose and hissing it across wet metal and faces. The rail is both gift and curse, a yard-high wall of packed dirt parallel to the river, enough bite for hull down if you're bold and lucky. Past it, the road and the ford. Behind it, a column pounding feet into mud and numbers whispered along the line. 22 minutes becoming 20 if no axle brakes and no horse balks. Vogel subtracts 2 more because people always move slower than numbers. He scans with battered binoculars, lenses smeared with oily wool, the morning haze dragging contrast out of the world, making shapes into thoughts. Magnification favors silhouette over detail. Today, he is betting on that. The river is dull tin. The rail line is a pencil stroke. Far back among leafless trees, he catches a hood, an open top, a stubby cannon, M8 Greyhound where he was told to expect one, and a carrier near it. He marks the distance against the tree line and measures it against the minutes he can spend. Clara pulls a fat black line from the muzzle brake back along the barrel, a painted shadow to add reach a memory will accept. A dog-eared plate passed between sappers showed it once. Elongate to suggest a 75 L70. Split the turret into 2 masses, if you can. She opens a brick of stolen schoolroom chalk and lays a second pale seam under the black, a line of fake light that reads as underside on an invisible barrel. Chalk is for dry, but she uses it anyway. Courage is a bigger solvent than diesel. Otto watches the lines appear and doesn't say what he thinks about magic and hate. He listens to the few G5 whine like a wasp in a jar, a cracked insulator turning voices to hiss. More words break than arrive. Infantry in the church ruins, sapper at the ford, smoke if possible. He strips off a glove and touches cold steel. His finger comes away, black and slick. Side skirts have torn away in scallops. Missing shirtsen make the hull's hips look broken. Brokenness is useful. Brokenness leaves room to lie. Vogel flashes a flag to the infantry screen. 2 short, 1 long. Hold. Boys with beards and winter faces nod without looking back. Behind them, the ford is all effort, a piano where no piano should be, scarfed women pulling carts too heavy, a horse balking until a hand eases instead of striking. A child looks at the tank as if at a church. Vogel drops inside. Helmets and knuckles knock. Oil, metal, damp wool, and fear make a smell you can't wash off. He taps Otto twice. Wait to see them, not ghosts. Clara lashes a tarp on sapper stakes behind the turret, droops it into false mass. The rain makes it sag, then pull tight. She paints a seam across it, adds a shadow under it, steps back and looks through someone else's glass. Mortar bursts shower grit on wet paint, dulling it. A gift? She wants more grit, less rain. She cannot order either. Whitaker sits his M8 in the trees and raises his binoculars, elbows on hood, an unlit cigarette stuck to his lip. The glass shows flat light, the rail, the smear of town, and a tank by the ford that's wrong. It wears a turret and somehow another. Its gun length feels eager. It reads like a cat he's heard about, but hasn't seen this close to houses. A week ago he assumed a gun was small and paid for it with a hole through an engine block and men climbing out with their jackets on fire. Overcaution is a flaw you live with. He looks for a flanking angle. The embankment's straight line flattens what it touches. The shape swells as mist blows thin, shrinks when drizzle thickens. He thumbs the mic. Hold, guns up, right bank eyes, feeler left, smoke ready. His voice is even, low enough for the wind to carry. He remembers the booklet passed around the mess last week, a greasy translation about German trick paint and dummy barrels. He had laughed then. He sees effort now. Behind the rail, a horse refuses the stones. The driver lifts a belt, then drops it, recognizing who he'd be striking. Two boys in coats too big shove at a wheel. The cart lurches, front dropping, back lifting, the load hovering like a held breath. Vogel watches, recalculates. 22 becomes 18, then 25 when reality finally wins. The tank idles rough. The fuel needle hovers below a quarter. The sump wears old grease like fish scales that catch the drizzle. Idling too long will cough a black rope into the fog, a signal flare you don't want. Clara paints a second ring that isn't a ring but a crescent meant to catch corner eyes looking to confirm what they fear. Don't paint what is. Paint what happens, a teacher once said. At 600 meters, a man reads symbols, not things. She places a line wrong so the mind can make it right. Her heart runs away. Guilt starts as a wash and builds. She keeps moving. Motion is the only solvent she has. Otto blinks, and the carrier in his sight blinks with him. Ghost, then target, then ghost. He murmurs to Vogel without lifting his eye. Greyhound at 2 o'clock behind birches. Carrier left. Maybe a third. Flat voice, the only way to keep it from trembling. Vogel listens more than he counts now. The mortars, rifle pops like fingers, a deeper gun far off. The bomb crater off the embankment would make their fake rear crown smarter if they moved, but motion snaps spells and invites brackets. Later, he tells himself, if later exists. The drizzle lightens for a minute. Wet paint shines, then flattens. Clara lays a gray slip under black, a knife edge of false light. A gust comes and then thinks better of it. She ties another torn square to the frame to make the shape taller, breaking the hull into 2 blocky beasts. She misses a teacher who said, "Good, now push," when she made a bold mistake. She pushes because there isn't time to be precious. In his ear, Whitaker hears a lieutenant at battalion scratch laugh about a captured pamphlet. They'll paint on a second turret if they think you're in a hurry. He has been in a hurry for 11 months. He repeats softly, not to anyone, we don't pay blood for the last 2 miles if we can pay patience. He lifts the glass again. The shape stays wrong on purpose. He orders a formal pause before instinct chews through discipline. Vogel feels the pause like a notch. Somewhere up the road, a driver who would have died now isn't dead. It buys minutes. It asks for a bill later. Stranger from the flanks, he tells Clara, not looking. The embankment makes a false horizon. A wide look from the right could tear their mask, make the shape odd but consistent. Clara slashes more geometry onto the tarp, making angles that agree with themselves just enough to pass. On the stones, the column keeps moving and stopping and moving again. A woman loses a shoe and doesn't stop looking for it. A soldier with an armband and a boy's jawline invents time with his hands. The ford won't be clear in 20 minutes. Vogel knows it as a hand closing on his chest. 25 if he can get the Americans to believe for 10, then 5 more. He squeezes Otto's shoulder. Now? Not yet. The few G5 spits and crackles. Sapper, charges, bridge, not ford. Wait, whistle? The insulator turns orders into puzzles. Vogel swears without energy. Outside, his flag flickers in drizzle because flags trump radios when both are broken. Clara slaps her brush flat against steel to sharpen a seam, lets drips run, then pushes grit into them so they read as old rain rivulets, not newborn lies. Whitaker's driver whispers, "Sir?" and stops. Quiet is loud. Whitaker rubs the rubber cups of his binoculars, see the purple after-image of the fake ring. He thinks about the orchard to the right, the dip that might hide a flank. The fog lifts for a breath, and the shape by the ford swells into a heavy, turned catty corner. He signals hold again, louder this time, because some things need to be said twice to hold their shape. The drizzle thickens, enough to streak if the mix is wrong. A black tear starts down the false ring. Clara wants to catch it. She lets it run when she sees it pooling a deeper shadow. The elongated muzzle feathers at the edges. Chalk bites bright on wet black when she dares. The line goes fat, then thin in a heartbeat, like a pulse painted on steel. Vogel drops to his chin at the cupola lip. Rain ticks on edge like coins. He smells chalk under diesel and oil, absurdly clean. He keeps the tree line in his glass because the moment you stop looking is the moment someone noses out. A whistle on the left could be sapper code or a kettle. He thinks of a desert sergeant who taught painted shadows with a cigarette stuck to his lip. That man is dead. The trick is for sun. This is not sun. He uses it anyway. Otto wipes sweat from the eyepiece with his sleeve, sight stilling on the carrier, nose angled, smoking as it edges forward, stops, edges again. He puts the reticle where a man might stand to look around armor and waits for a sound that means not yet is now. His mouth is dry. He doesn't think of children. He thinks of angles and weak points and how a carrier face shatters above the towing hook when hit clean. Whitaker holds his breath to steady the glass. The tank is too much. He answers its tone with his own into the radio. Guns up, he adds. Flank eyes now, no heroics, pointing right with his whole hand because gestures can beat static. He can almost feel a German commander looking back through the fog with equal caution and a different prayer. The glass fixes on blackened lines and the image stops blinking. The decision narrows to a point. Guns up. No one breathes in the Panzer, the words frosting in headsets and pulling at the skin. Vogel's hand hovers on the traverse. The buckle scar along his jaw goes white. Beyond the embankment, barrels swing, small gestures that read as intent. The tank sits high on road wheels, side skirts missing in torn scallops, false rings still wet around the cupola. It is exposed on flat ground with only a crater lip behind and the ford to the right. The prayer on its back hasn't been answered yet. Mortar smoke flowers open, white, then gray, folding in damp air. In that softening, tar lines and chalk slashes swell into bulk. The painted muzzle hangs heavy, plausible. Through the periscope, Vogel watches his lie gain weight and tastes iron. Seconds bought. Not enough of them. Clara half crawls out of the loader's hatch, chalk stub between bloodless fingers, smear on her cheek like war paint. She looks at the ford because she cannot not. Tops of carts, hunched backs. A gray mule balks, then goes. This was supposed to be 10 minutes ago. She presses lower as shrapnel ticks against steel. In the drift, the painted turret reads as turret. She dares to believe, and that hurts. Across the damp field, Whitaker works the focus wheel with careful fingers. The beast at the rail refuses to be ordinary. Second turret, toolbox and tarp, painted gun that keeps going. He tastes the old lesson. Binoculars at range lie differently than eyes up close. He doesn't trust glass, but he trusts a gun can still kill. Smoke between us and that thing, he says. Carrier forward, slow, stay low, left, Greyhound hull down. He does not charge a gun he can't read. Vogel sees smoke drift from the left where the river bends. Smoke makes crude art into silhouette machine. The tarp behind the turret flutters and pretends to traverse. Otto lifts his head, whispers, "It looks right, like a man on a plank over black water." The radio coughs. End of ford. 2 more wagons. Hold, hold. Then dies back into static. Vogel looks at the ford regardless and sees what he knew. A hat that belonged to another century, a thin boy with a bucket, a mother's skirt sucked to her legs by spray. Stay, lie, be large. Rain slants from the west and shows paint's base nature. Tar and diesel turn to syrup, lines carved down into tongues along welds. Crisp becomes streak. Clara curses, jabs the chalk hard, doubles the false ring, fattens the muzzle shadow, so it holds even when the weather tries to erase it. Chalk is wrong for rain. She uses it anyway because a thick wrong line is better than none when glass will make patterns for you. The carrier noses forward, glossy bow plate, rivets like beetle spots. It moves like anything that knows it is being looked at. Slow, left, driver's head level with armor, goggles fogged. Whitaker keeps the Greyhound back, 37 silent, traversing. "Steady," he tells a man too far away to hear. "Don't silhouette. Look for what's missing." He sees nothing missing enough. Vogel measures how close the carrier can creep before the story tears. Their choice of cowl down at the crater was a word they will have to die on. Only the rear of the turret and the tarp crown sit above the lip, the real barrel depressed into readiness. Otto has AP in the breech without being told, and his foot flat because there won't be time later. He made a decision in a vacuum. He hates making decisions in vacuums. The engine coughs a wet bark, lifts a streamer of blue-gray from a tired gasket. Vogel's hand hovers near ignition, holding idle off the stall. The gauge hunts near a quarter, dips when the hull tips. Too much idle will choke it, too little, and it starts rough, shaking the illusion apart. Every adjustment is a coin shaved on both sides. Another round lands too near, sound wrong and heavy. Otto counts 3 heartbeats and thinks about what numbers can't predict. "Range," he says to fill the hole left by weight. Clara leans left, redraws where rain is turning chalk into eyelashes, drops the ring lower to match tarp sag. Eyes love symmetry, trust realism. She bets that has not changed. Whitaker admires, despite himself, the audacity. The tarp behind pretends to be a turret bustle. The rail bed cancels lower half tells. Missing skirts, road wheel spacing, cupola shape. He has to judge the top third, and the top third says, "Problem." He taps the leaflet under his map with knuckles, grit like a dare. "Smoke again," he says. "Don't give them a clean look." Each request buys the German seconds. He knows it and hates the arithmetic of prudence. Another squall darkens steel and makes the painted muzzle breathe when the real barrel nods. It fools even Otto for a blink. Then the carrier makes a small mistake and clears a tuft at the wrong angle. Plate shows. Range is good. Hesitation ends. The trigger breaks clean. The 7.5 cracks and slaps fog. The carrier nose kicks. Left track leaps its sprocket. It slews to a stop with a squeal more animal than metal, then a surprised silence. No one cheers. Breath leaves like a lung emptied too fast. They have announced themselves living to every barrel waiting. Clara's eyes fill because the longer the trick holds, the longer she is a wall and a target. Vogel slams in another round without a tremor. We bought the pause we lied for. We invited the answer we tried to avoid. Whitaker swallows a curse because everyone is listening. Proof ends pause. "Guns up," he says again, now aiming voice at engagement. "Greyhound, 2 into the lip. Smoke him. Mortars. Bracket. Carriers hold. Don't crowd him. Take his angles." Caution stiffens into resolve. He pictures the wide hook through wet poplars, sees the flank as safe as anything in mud is safe. It will cost time and prick his pride. He pays. Light pushes through a cleft in cloud enough to throw truer contrast. Chalk shines, tar soaks. The painted muzzle waits for its worst enemy. Vogel feels the light like a hand on skin. When sun opens, their fake will fight real shadow at 50 meters and lose. He has to keep the distance his lie was tuned for. That means staying. That means mortar patience. The Greyhound chews dirt from the crater lip, throwing it against them, dust pattering the sight. Otto flinches, then returns to glass. Area. Short, Vogel orders, and Otto moves without his own consent. The HE flower leaps, rolls toward the trees, sound declaring a gun larger than it is. Beyond the poplar, something grinds right. Not a probe. A path. The drizzle slackens. Chalk holds longer. Clara drags light along the fake turret edge. Another mortar pops. Smoke makes their drawing perfect for a blink. Then wind lifts it. A conjurer's reveal. Refugees keep coming. A man goes under a wagon side and pushes until a wheel catches. Vogel wants to make windmills with his arms. He holds. "Traverse last quarter," he says. Move too far and the lie splits. Move too little and the hook bites. Whitaker's flanking section calls the ground soft, holes tucked in shadows. They go wide anyway, using trunks for rhythm, expecting a blast. The turret creeps in answer, a crew with heads on. He admires, then tightens, because admiration is a luxury. He tells the FO to drop 2 on the far bank to herd anything escaping back, to squeeze the column and the liar together. Shells on the far bank tear the morning's civility. A horse screams and someone hushes it with the flat of a hand. The jam breaks and sticks again. Vogel hears it like a child coughs at night. He wants to throw he onto the far verge, a dirt curtain without a harm of stone. He does that, aiming low to discourage without killing, buying a beat for a mother with a pram whose wheels don't want this century. Whitaker watches the tank throw earth by the ford, and for the first time looks at people rather than silhouettes. The frame widens to include a boy in a flat cap and a woman's shawl. Conscience adds a root to caution. He shifts his flank order from charge to enfilade, push to where rifles can rake if the tank moves, but don't rush through civilians into that gun's mouth. Weather plays a heavy card. Drizzle goes to beads, then stops. Haze thins. Edges sharpen. The rail line cuts clean. The painted rear crown holds yet, a black disc on the crater lip, but the elongated muzzle tail shows a joint where none should be. Binoculars lie less. Whitaker's suspicion hardens. Paint and tarp over miles of intent. Inside, a new smell cuts through diesel. Hot metal. The driver says the clutch chatters, a judder in the calf. Fuel sputters once, blue-gray ribbon thickening. Vogel wants motionless to save what machine life they have. The hook must be answered. The ford must be covered for the last wagons that multiplied rather than dwindled. He gambles that minutes can move the lie into a new angle where crater and sun become allies again. 1 meter forward, stop, 3 back, hold. Otto's finger itches as the Greyhound flashes like a match. He recites instruction, wind, lead, elevation, to keep his hands from killing too soon. He loads another HE. He will make noise and throw dirt until the lie falls apart or someone makes him honest. He plucks the string of Whitaker's patience with blast. Clara's chalk nub bites skin, leaving white half-moons. Ritual helps redraw the line 3 times, not because it needs it, but to steady a heart. She used to sketch in cafes. Light was once benign. Today, light is a predator. She thinks of the desert photographs in the manual, spectacular lies that work when sun cooperates, and knows they are using tricks made for another sky. The mortars pause a degree, small arms chatter on the flank. The sound is a carpenter's grain. Vogel has seconds to decide, pull and be seen as what they are, or hold and take whatever the hook brings. He looks at the water on the stones. A boy slips. A mother drags him by the collar. Choice locks. Forward 1/2 meter. Stop. Ready to go on my mark. Greyhound right. I hear it. Sun glints a comma on the periscope. Move and the tarp peels. Stay and enfilade hurts. The driver's eyes find Vogel's for the final yes or no. Outside, the last cart is on the stones, sacks whose weight will be measured by how far they get. Whitaker says now into his mic, engines rising to the right. A bright glare hits a shard near the dead carrier. Coin toss. Whitaker's wide hook moves as the sun breaks. Real shadows betray paint. The long barrel they drew becomes stubby in glare. The fake muzzle shadow slides off steel like oil. Vogel sees it too and knows every glass in the trees will read it. Hands off the trigger, he snaps. The next shot guides their guns. He keeps smoke flat. He won't give them a rope to follow. Clara takes burlap and poles, hands shaking, scabs the fluttering tarp into a rigid plane behind the turret so the rear mass holds line in sunlight. Chalk has bled, but in this light she drags white across black and scuffs it until the lie is geometry. Gusts lift the burlap like a heartbeat. She knots down hard, teeth on string. The flankers will see profile first. The paint must hold from there. A round detonates short on the railbed, sparks ring and die. Vogel reverses a half-length back into the crater they chose at dawn. Only the painted crown peaks now, low above the lip. Real optics sit just below, in a slit between churned dirt and steel. If he moves more, the mask collapses. Less, and they'll be pinned in their own hole. The refugees still on the ford look like a problem no gun can solve. A wicker pram slips. A boy hauls it up. A Wehrmacht truck fishtails, water glittering under wheels. Vogel checks a watch with a cracked face, adds seconds he doesn't own, and signals by flag to hold flare until the last cart is off the stones. The radio answers mush. A runner waves from a shed ruin, red cloth slicing rain. Under this sky, voices a flag. Whitaker shields his glass from the glare, calls smoke to cover the hook. Voice even, still tasting the dead scout car. Greyhound keeps the road cut. Carriers drift wide past the rail, eyes down. Over the net, someone mentions that manual again. He feels the logic lock. Painted shadows, tarp mass, telltale off by a degree. He will test it with range and angle before he lets anyone die close. Otto watches carriers slide left. Sound reaches through trees and sunlace. He hovers on the elevating wheel like a priest above a catechism, and holds because sometimes not shooting is the only courage you can afford. 7 AP are talismans he hopes remain undisturbed. Clara sketches a sun and angles on a torn page, jams it under Vogel's wrist. We need their sun. If the false rear crown's shadow and the real sun can be brought into agreement, it might stitch the rip for a few more looks. Vogel inches the hull, right track forward, left idling, until a beam slants across the tarp in rough rhyme to her chalk. It helps by degrees. Mortar smoke blooms. For a breath, the painted forms read perfectly again. Whitaker stops, uses contrast to let the heavy silhouette swell and swallow detail. He worries the ratio of turret to hull, gun line against embankment, numbers almost right on purpose. Rare tanks don't show by Fords unless someone means them to. He calls for one more screen and a test, not because he doubts, but because belief gets men killed. A shell slaps water across the ford. The last ox cart climbs out. The back of the column spills onto mud. An NCO holds hand signals too long, trying to say wait, go, run, without sound. Vogel taps his watch and counts backward from 22, the number never true to begin with. He decides to ride the lie past its expiration. Stitch above the tree line and the right hook, he tells Otto. Make them respect air. To Clara, any white left? Belly only. Reflect the glare. She finds crusted wash in a tin, dabs light onto darkness with a rag, the canvas a moving target with shells for a metronome. Whitaker's hook reaches a culvert, men down behind stone, helmets like pebbles. He asks the greyhound for a ranging shot, not to strike, but to listen. Deep or shallow return. The clap sings back thick and hollow, wrong for a true heavy behind that crater lip. This feels like a skin over emptiness and a real barrel in front of it. He calls what he hears and adjusts. Hook continues, center fixes, mortars step. A carrier noses too close, driver pulling a line he shouldn't. Otto hesitates, sees the boy behind the Bren gun shield, and for a beat the misidentified target reaches out of his chest. A 30 chases the crater lip, stitching air. Reflex cracks free. He throws helo at water, flipping a decision without flipping a man. The vehicle slews and stops. Whitaker hears discipline in that shot and nods at caution sharpened by respect. He calls for a 6-pounder from company support on the parallel lane. The tool for this job is grinding toward him, teeth fit for this bite. Minutes peel. A pigeon flaps up from the rail and smears into nothing in front of a round, meant for something with a history. He dislikes the job. He is precise with it. The embankment's line splits the tank into a puzzle. Profile sells from one angle and collapses from another where the hook opens. The rear crown begins to look like what it is, a tarp that wants to be honest. Clara tugs a corner to make it breathe. A mortar punches earth, fine dirt, pastes face and paint. She wipes, tastes tar and copper, ties again because too many carts just bought their last square meter. Fuel sloshes low, prolonged idle lays wet black on the exhaust. They can't sprint, they can faint. Vogel edges the gun down to look heavy and tells himself there will be one necessary shot before they go. That shot must make purchase, not just noise. It comes when the greyhound noses too far to the culvert, greed poking past doctrine. Otto lays the reticle like a careful table, breath a scale, and sends a single AP. The hit glances, glass cracks, rubber wails. The vehicle jerks back. Respect is a sound. Whitaker reads it fast. Bite, placement, discipline. Not a panicking beast, a practiced one. He answers with more smoke and tightens the hook, a tendril visible now between two broken freight cars. He calls a rifle grenade to the lip and keeps men off the point because nobody gets to be a hero into fog and paint. The Ford empties. Mud wakes calm. Clara leans her head against steel and feels cold, gratitude, and guilt, a handle she can't put down. The boy at the Bren gun will live with a story about a shot that made him duck and leave. She draws one last seam to pull the gun's shadow into a turret line. It holds under this light for this second. Mortars become regular. One lands in the crater they just left and turns their former shelter to a steaming bowl. You left when you should have, the morning says. Vogel maps their exit. Butcher's yard to the right. Smoke as guard. Snap into the copse where the embankment dips. The runner's flare hisses. Now. Smoke. Canisters clink, vomit white, then gray. Edges blur. The second turret becomes heroic again when it doesn't have to stand next to truth. Hands find levers in order. They back away into a yard where pigs once hung. A chain swings, clicking against a beam, a metronome for leaving. Clara cranes for a last look as they pivot because artists watch the work die. Drizzle returns fat. Paint and soot meet water and run. The false ring thickens on one side, peels on the other. A bruise that wants to be a secret turns public. Whitaker registers the lateral slip and commits the hook. Now, he says, men he cannot see answering by moving the way they were taught to when a monster is only a man. Smoke complicates. A stray machine gun complicates more. This will cost more than minute one promised. He breathes rain, keeps crisp. The Panzer's rear kisses broken brick. A fender tears with a noisy rip, another cost paid into a ledger he never asked to keep. The radio coughs one last sentence through the cracked insulator from no one familiar. For the love of God, now. Vogel doesn't think God loves any of this. He loves the people who just passed the ford. That is enough to hold weight. He asks the engine for cooperation. It gives him one breath. A rifle grenade pops and skids into the yard where they will not be in 3 heartbeats. Metallic fear is a taste and a fact. Otto keeps his hand steady because that is the only thing he can keep steady now. He thinks he will never paint. He smiles without humor at the woman who did. Clara's hair sticks to her face. A tar streak marks her cheek. She looks like a painter who went to war and forgot why. She hands Vogel the rag with the last of the white. He wipes the sight, a sacrament of clarity. He centers on the tree line where Whitaker's men are about to appear. He does not send a last shot because leaving is the better gift. They slip, they grind. They're gone, the second turret vanishing behind brick and smoke like a joke retold until it sours. Whitaker curses as the target drops and shifts again, chess pieces clacking in hands that will shake later. To the lip, he orders. Eyes into the yard. Don't waste men at the point. Caution never stopped being a virtue. Water clears at the ford, silt settles, the river resumes its bright small work. Where the tank held every gaze, only smear remains. Tar tears weeping down gray steel. A second turret peeling into rain. For a moment, it looks like a brush dragged once across a page before the hand lifts. The chain clicks in the butcher's yard. Heavier engines approach on the road. The hook turns. The next decision is whether to follow smoke into brick or cut the lane and wait.